Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag and drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. I'm Pete Wright.
And I'm Andy Nelson.
Welcome to The Next Reel. When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
In just a matter of seconds, you're going to hear a classic episode of this show from back in the day when we called ourselves Movies We Like.
It took us a while to settle into the show's format, so you'll notice some differences as you listen to these episodes. For instance, it takes us a bit of time to actually get into the conversation about the movie. Things like that.
But we're still proud of the conversations about the movies themselves, and we think they're worth keeping in the library.
So enjoy these episodes from our back catalog. And you can become part of our Discord community, learn more about the show, and find out how you can become a supporting member at thenextreel.com.
So thank you, everybody, for downloading and listening to The Next Reel. We appreciate your time and attention, and we hope you enjoy the show.
It's happening.
Shakalaka.
It's happening right now. So, are we honest about what has been going on for the last 3 weeks?
I don't know. Dare we come clean? All right, let's just come clean.
All right, so everything for the last 3 weeks has been completely fraudulent. How's that? There, it's out. Some of the movies we talked about in the shows from the last 3 weeks don't even exist. You may think you've seen them.
We hired 2 maids to come in and just record the show for us.
It's been vacation. We've had a little vacation. We do this. So we recorded we have had some episodes we recorded back to back to get them out of the way so that we could go have a little vacation. So we did that, and we're now back. We're on track. We're back in the saddle, so to speak.
Again.
And
back where a friend is a friend.
And in black also. And right where you belong. And
I thought that was where love lifted us up.
Where love does, in fact, lift us up as well.
And you can tell we haven't talked in 3 weeks.
I know we haven't. We should have. We just sort of pressed record. Maybe we did that prematurely. Is what I'm thinking. But we have some old. Do we have some old business? I think we do. Well, it's the next reel, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Pete Wright, and that over there is Andy Nelson, and we talk about movies on this show. You can find us at thenextreel.com. You can join the conversation at facebook.com/thenextreel, or you can always tweet us, and you can find out all that good stuff. Tweet The Next Reel, or at Pete Wright, or at Soda Creek Film if you're so inclined. And finally, you can jump to this link right off of our website, the top 100 gold list of our favorite movies of all time over on Flickchart. So that's another way to keep up with what we're talking about. So there you have it. Those are the digits.
That's the skinny.
That's the skinny. What do we have in terms of? Do we have any comments to respond to? Over that we've missed over the last 3 weeks. We had a couple of people who were very excited that we did Midnight Run, and nobody has yet shared, I think, my assertion that is in fact Robert De Niro's worst film.
That's because I think you have, between that and Taxi Driver, I'm starting to feel like maybe you just have something against Robert De Niro.
And you know what? All evidence would seem to lead that, but that's not true. When I think Robert De Niro, I think I'm very happy about his role in the universe. Those are just, we've picked 2 movies that are.
I don't know.
How did we do that?
I'm looking forward to watching another one, and you're going to go, it's funny. I enjoy the movie, but man, that De Niro, who hired him?
I'm telling you, man, that's not going to be how it shakes out. I feel better about it going forward. I think we've got him out of the way.
It would have been great if it would have only cast a real actor.
That's just mean. You take that back. So that was that, and let's see. I believe we even. Well, you talk for a minute. Go ahead. I'm looking for something.
I don't have anything. Have anything.
How am I? You're supposed to vamp. That's what we do. We go back and forth, and then I have to search for something, and you vamp.
Well, I do think it's interesting, and this really doesn't have anything to do with what we've been talking about, but I do think it's interesting that Ryan Reynolds, we did point out on Facebook that Ryan Reynolds and Mary Louise Parker both have 2 movies opening this coming weekend. Ryan Reynolds, of course, in Turbo and R.I.P.D., and I think it's kind of interesting that they ended up that way. And I think, to me, it seems like it's a summer of family-friendly films. Seeing that Despicable Me 2 beat out the opening weekend of Pacific Rim, I have a feeling that Turbo is likely to take this weekend, beat out R.I.P.D., beat out Red 2.
You really think so?
Yeah, I think so.
I'm not sure that Turbo has what it takes. There.
I don't know. It's a pretty fast snail.
And I think you just summed it up.
R.I.P.D., I think, is going to be in the same camp as Pacific Rim. It's going to be a geeky sort of film where certain geeky fans are going to go see it, but it's not something that appeals to the mainstream. That's my sense. Red 2, maybe. That might take it. Honestly, I don't quite know what the box office was for the first Red. Maybe it will pull up there something comparable to what the first one did. I don't know if, like I said, I don't know if the first one.
I get in trouble every time I talk about Red, so I don't feel like I need to comment. But I would like to say R.I.P.D. I think you're giving it a little bit too much credit. It just, I haven't seen it. I have not read I believe it was a comic.
Graphic
novel. It was graphic. Yeah. And both look extremely dumb. Judging, I shouldn't, a book by its proverbial cover, it looks really dumb.
True Grit crossed with Men in Black, crossed with Ghostbusters.
There are only so many mashups one can take. This is the meta mashup.
Yeah, and maybe I am being a little too nice to it, but I still think Turbo is likely to beat that one out for sure.
Yeah. I don't know. I think Despicable Me is probably still has legs to it. Have you seen Pacific Rim?
I did. Yeah.
What's your verdict?
I thought it was enjoyable. I thought whatever the lead character's name was Charlie Hunnam.
Mm-hmm.
I thought was bland and lifeless and practically killed the film for me. He was so bad. And I shouldn't say bad. It's dull, and just like almost like I was watching a blank screen every time it came on. It was rough to sit through.
Did you feel a little bit like you were watching Midnight Run, but only the De Niro scenes?
Oh man.
No,
maybe that's what
please.
You felt like.
No. Okay, so I good. I have not seen it yet. We only just got back from our vacation in the woods. But you know what we saw? We did our Chautauqua trip, and every year we do we usually do a show about one of the classic films in the Chautauqua Classic Film Series. Film critic David Zinman is a regular Chautauquan, and he does this series throughout the summer where he brings in these super classic films from in this case, gosh, one was Saboteur 60 or 42, 43, and it was Hitchcock's first American-made film. And so in this case, he brought Saboteur in, and we watch it in the Chautauqua Cinema is this beautiful classic, balcony theater, and I always get the last seat at the very top of the balcony. It's the best seat in the house. Everybody else it's just crazy for not going right back up to the top. Get my big popcorn, and I really love it. You know what? That movie, it was just really chaotic, and I think that it had the story was really fun, and it's a good thriller, and the cast was great, and the editing just broke it. So we didn't do a show on it. I didn't push for a show on that. But I do want to cover one other thing which we have talked about. I said I was going to do, which was this World War Z. So the last film board we did was World War Z, and at the time I had not read the book.
Oh yeah.
And I've read the book. Yeah. And wow.
It's two very different beasts.
Exactly. And at first, you're reading the first major segment. I think it's broken up into like 6 kind of segments, chapters, I guess, 6, 7 chapters, something like that. And at first I'm reading it, and I'm sort of in mourning because there is no protagonist character to follow. You know, I mean, there's no central kind of character that you can follow through the whole thing. It's just these stories of this kind of neutral reportage of the event of the World War Z, of the apocalypse. But man, so I got through that part, and then I got into that place where you're just trying to figure out how did they possibly think that they were going to make this into a movie. And then once I got through that, you just sort of let go, and man, I fell in love with it. By the end, I was really in love with what Max Brooks had done with that film or with that book, and I'm actually more excited to see what they do with hopefully the next 2 World War Z films. I'm now really intrigued by how they tell the story of kind of the reclaiming and the rebuilding of civilization as a result. So. I really liked it. I
think it could be really, really neat to see.
Did you catch Redemption? We talked about this one. This is Statham, newest one. You caught it?
Hummingbird. I absolutely caught it.
Hummingbird?
That's the British title.
Thing. Yeah, British. So they do that differently.
Hummingbird in England, and I think it's called Killer Joe in France.
Which is weird because there was already a Killer Joe, wasn't there? I know. That's weird.
Killer Joe, yeah.
So what did you think of it? I had poo-pooed it originally. You were the one who said it was supposed to be great.
I had a great time. I really enjoyed it. There's something about, what's his name? Stephen Knight. Stephen Knight and his writing that I really am drawn to. And I think it's because he really looks at issues of immigration and kind of the lower class versus the upper class. And he did that in Dirty Pretty Things. He did that in Eastern Promises, and he does it in Redemption. And I really enjoy it. I had a hard time buying Statham in his long-haired wig. Luckily, he wasn't in that for very long.
Yeah, that was nice.
He quickly went back to the Statham.
He kept looking. I kept thinking of watching Rocky Horror. Like he looked like.
Right, exactly.
That was so good. Yes, but you know what I liked about it is that it wasn't as like there was some good kind of thug action, but it wasn't an action film per se. I was really intrigued by all the performances in there, and I thought the nun was particularly great. She was so fun to watch.
But and not just fun to watch, but really well cast.
Yeah, beautifully cast.
And in a role that you would typically think that they would cast some starlet who's all of a sudden playing this nun, and you're like, okay, I don't really buy you as a nun. But okay, I'll suspend disbelief for the purposes of the film. But he really, Stephen Knight as the director really cast somebody in the role who fit that role really well. I believe she was or is a Polish actress and worked just so well in the film. I really enjoyed her, and I enjoyed the relationship that she had with Statham in that film.
It sounds like you'd like it enough that maybe we should do a show on it.
I think we just might.
I felt like living in the future. I don't do this a whole lot with the, download the iTunes for the new release films, the simultaneous release.
Yeah.
But I did it for this one, and I really liked the experience. I'm going to be doing it more.
Nice.
I like this. I really like where it's going.
Yeah.
We had a couple of articles we're going to talk about this week, but we talked about the long format Netflix thing that was floating around, and Netflix secret plan to destroy cinema.
They are. That is their secret plan.
Yes, and there was the other one. What was the other one? Oh, Sarmento sent me the one. So before we talk about Netflix, Sarmento sent a link you'll find on the in the show notes to what the Iron Throne, how big the Iron Throne really is. If you're Game of Thrones fans, you know what I'm talking about, and it's really cool. It's George R.R. Martin talking about giving sort of an artist's rendering of what he thought the Iron Throne should look like. And it's, needless to say, it's a little bit different.
The scope is vast.
It's really vast. A lot of swords, a lot of dead bodies.
Yes.
Associated with that. Are you moving through it at all?
I haven't watched a single episode, but I really enjoy The Throne.
Oh.
It's on my list.
I know. You know what I started watching was Under the Dome.
Yeah, me too.
What do you think?
And I was very excited to see that the first episode was helmed by our girl with the dragon tattoo friend.
I know, right? The Swedish version.
Niels
Arden-Opleff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was okay.
I'm a big fan of the book. I really enjoyed what they're doing with the show. I enjoyed the slight shift that they're taking. It's almost like taking the characters, taking the story, but acknowledging, hey, we're going to turn this into a long-form show, and so we're going to tweak a lot and change a lot. And I really like what they're doing with it.
Oh, I'm glad to hear you say that. I like it too. It still feels a little bit like a guilty pleasure for me.
It is, but it's Stephen King. I mean, it's all guilty pleasure.
Yeah, all right. Okay, I'm off the hook.
Yes.
So we're going to talk trailers. Let's do some trailers. We've been gabbing enough.
Yes.
Enough out of you. What do you want to do? Let's do your trailer. Do you want to do mine first or yours?
Yours is heavier. Mine's a little more uplifting. Let's start with yours.
Okay,
let's go heavy.
We'll do mine. Okay, let's go heavy. I am very excited about this. The trailer's been out for a couple months, I think. The movie comes out at the end of next month. Is that right? The movie is Closed Circuit, starring the comedic stylings of Eric Bana, Rebecca Hall, who. She's not British, right?
She is British.
She's really British?
She really is
British. She does a really convincing American accent.
She does. She was amazing in The Town. I never would have thought that she was British.
I'm surprised that didn't. I mean, I just never even thought to ask.
Yeah,
because she
did her British well in The Prestige. We got to see that.
That's right. Gosh, man, mystery wrapped inside a Twinkie. And then Julia Stiles, not speaking in a British accent. This is it looks like a great sort of British. It's a legal thriller, directed by John Crowley, who hasn't done a whole lot. He did, let's see, Is Anybody There in 2008, Boy A, and Intermission. I haven't seen any of them.
But
Michael
I think
Caine
they're,
isn't Anybody There.
Yeah, I think they're kind of low budget indie British films is kind of, I think, his world.
So this is a significantly sort of larger thriller film, big explosion, and it follows the legal team trying to unravel it. It looks like a great thriller, and I'm very excited about it. So Julia Stiles, Eric Bana, and Rebecca Hall, yes, and Jim Broadbent.
And it's written by Stephen Knight, who we were just talking about.
we were just talking about Stephen Knight. I should have said that. Yeah. So
absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, it looks really good, and so keep an eye out for that. And it opens August 28th.
The thing that worries me about Stephen Knight, with all of this great stuff that he's working on,
is Clash of the Titans 3.
Clash of the Titans 3. What? Where does that come from?
Right?
Hey, this guy writes these great, gritty stories about class and immigrant warfare. Let's get him to write Clash of the Titans. Oh my!
You know what we need in Clash of the Titans? More immigrant warfare. I thought that too.
Oh my!
That's funny. All right.
Indeed.
All right. So what do you got?
My trailer I have been very excited about for quite a while. It's called Saving Mr. Banks. Of course, Tom Hanks is my fave. I'm a big Tom Hanks fan. Mm-hmm. Very much excited to see him playing another one of my faves, Walt Disney. I think that is just, makes me giddy with excitement, that the fact that he's playing Walt Disney. I think it's a fascinating character to get to play. And even if I am never convinced that Tom Hanks is Walt Disney, and I'm always seeing Tom Hanks playing Walt Disney, I think that he's going to give a great performance. And I think Emma Thompson is going to be wonderful in this as P.L. Travers, the author of the novel Mary Poppins. And that's what the story is about. It takes place when Walt Disney is trying to convince P.L. Travers to let him have the rights to Mary Poppins so that he can make the movie. And she's none too thrilled of the idea of it being Disneyfied. So it looks like a great trailer, and I am just very excited to see what they do with this.
It really does look like a great trailer. I was so ready to lampoon you over this film, and when he said, there's a line that I'm going to butcher, but he's talking to her on the phone. He says, "Who wouldn't want to go to Walt Disney World with Walt Disney?"
Yeah, right.
I was like, I want to go with Walt Disney.
Oh no!
It looks really very sweet, and hopefully the trailer, I think, tries to uncover what the real sort of sense, the sense and sensibility of Mary Poppins, and yes. I think that. I really like the angle they take the film. I think it looks like we're in for a great relationship. It may be a little bit meta. I think it would have been really bold if this film were from like Fox or something. But Walt Disney, Disney releasing a movie about Walt Disney, that's.
I think they would have been hard. I think anyone else would have been hard pressed to get the rights. So it's.
That's what I mean. Bold, man. Bold.
That's right. I love seeing Jason Schwartzman and B.J. Novak playing the Sherman Brothers.
When when he slides the Superfragicali sheet music behind that was just great. Yeah, well, unmake it up.
Yeah, unmake it up. This was a script, I believe, that was on the blacklist. There's this notorious blacklist every year that is released at the end of the year of all of the hot scripts that are out there that nobody has purchased the rights to. And I believe that this script was one of those scripts a couple years ago. And so obviously Disney, with everyone involved in this film, it makes sense that Disney would snatch it up so that they could make it. And so I'm very excited to, very excited to see it. It comes out, it's a ways away. It doesn't come out till Christmas, but very much looking forward to it.
Oh, it's going to be a perfect timing.
Yeah,
It
absolutely.
really looks good. And so, in the spirit of Disney family films, tonight we continue our conversation, our series of Couples on the Run with with Tony Scott and Quentin Tarantino's classic American romantic film and Brad Pitt vehicle, True Romance.
There you go. What a lead-in.
Right?
What a lead-in. Yeah, I tell you.
How much do you love this movie?
I really love it. This was one of those movies that, I really enjoyed when it came out. I saw it. It was one of the real kind of the small theaters. It had. I don't know if it had played a while or if it was just one of those limited releases around where I was or whatever. But I saw it. It was still a packed house. The audience loved it and everything. And then I kind of forgot about it for a while. And then I picked it up when it came out and I watched it some more and I loved it. And it's one of those movies that kind of has drifted through my consciousness for a while. And then I hadn't seen it in it's probably been at least 10 years. And it was one of those I was getting a little nervous about. I have to say, I was like, gosh, is this one that I really enjoyed? And now I'm going to all of a sudden turn into Mr. Grumpy Pants about. But lo and behold, I still really enjoyed it. And I had a great time.
You did not have to put on your grumpy pants.
No, I didn't.
Andy shows up in his happy pants.
That's right. The grumpy pants are hanging in the closet still.
I am totally wearing my happy pants on this film. I'm like you. I haven't seen. I've had it in the collection for a long time, sure. And it's probably been as long since I've seen it, and I think the last time I watched it, I did not appreciate it as much as I appreciate it now. And certainly did not appreciate it as much when I saw it in the theater, as apparently many agreed and, did not see it in the theater. But is this movie stacked with talent. And, I'm watching this thing thinking, it's perfectly paced. It's perfectly, there's no one in here who pulls a De Niro. There is just, all of the performances are just really strong to the tone and feel of the film. And it is built, this overall sort of storyline of Clarence in Alabama is built around these perfect moments of cameo performances from an unreal cast.
Yeah, no kidding.
In this film, I mean, it's just it is unreal. I had no memory of the sort of family tree, sort of the collision of family trees that exists in this movie.
Well, and what's interesting is watching it again now, as opposed to when it did come out or early, is seeing people who you recognize now, who back then you may not recognize very much, but now you're like, oh, and then he was in that movie, and that movie, that movie. Like all these faces that kind of kept popping up, aside from the big ones.
Right. I mean, this is that film. I mean, I grew up with Balky.
That's right. It's a totally different Balky. Oh.
But okay. So the film is about the Christian Slater as Clarence Worley and Patricia Arquette as Alabama Whitman. Christian Slater is, kind of down and out looking for love with the fantastic opening scene about his revealing his innermost secret feelings for Elvis. Elvis, his quote mentor, played by Val Kilmer, whom we never see.
Well, we see, but we never see his face.
Right. Yeah. He's the disembodied voice of Val Kilmer as Elvis. So he runs a comic book, or he's a clerk at a comic book store, and he's doing his best to find love. He ends up meeting, his boss ends up hiring Alabama, who is a call girl for, 6 days?
4 days.
4 days. She's been a call girl for 4 days, and she comes to meet Clarence as a gift, and then they fall in love, and so begins the roller coaster
Of true romance.
And that's one of the things I think I like the most about this movie, is that from there, they come to quick and ironically believable terms with their relationship. Usually, when these sorts of crazy, I just met you, now I love you romances happen on screen, they are kind of on the razor's edge of believability. And this one I really get sucked into, because I think they own it in the universe of the film. And I think they really have set the tone of kind of goofiness that makes it really appropriate. And I think Patricia Arquette really nails the winsomeness of her relationship with Clarence. And so...
Well, and I think part of that comes from, sorry to interrupt, I think part of that comes from this sense that this film is kind of a fairy tale.
Right.
Just from the opening and this very frolicking tune that kind of introduces the film, this music that it's great music. I always have thought it was Hans Zimmer's original piece, but it's actually it's Hans Zimmer's theme based on Gassenhauer from Karl Orff's Schoolwork piece, which is the same piece that's used in Terrence Malick's Badlands. And I find it interesting, as a side note, that it doesn't actually credit Karl Orff's work anywhere in it. It just says Hans Zimmer does the music. So to me, it doesn't seem like he's basing it on the theme as so much as stealing it, which Hans Zimmer is known to do. But regardless, all of that aside, the music has this fairy tale feel to it, and this kind of just frolicking sense. And I feel like the way that the relationship goes and how fast they fall in love, and just the whole tone of the film all the way through, gives it this fairy tale vibe that I really enjoy, and I do find it very believable when they fall in love that fast.
I absolutely agree. From there on out, I mean, you really feel like these two are a unit all the way through the very last scene, which we'll talk about in a bit. And then, again, like a fairy tale, they come in and out of the sort of the world of these other of the criminal element. First they meet. They end up meeting Drexel Spivey, played by Gary Oldman, who is remarkably powerful in this one of his Keystone Thug performances. He's in the film for
very small,
very short time, and it's the way he's presented. He's presented in sort of a kind of he's going to be our main antagonist in the film, and he's really not. He is the pimp that Alabama had been working for, and Clarence goes to tell him what for, and says, "You don't need to hang out with her anymore," and then they duke it out, and that's the first real sequence of extreme violence that we get in the film, as Clarence sort of tries to enter a world that he's ill-equipped to enter, I think.
Yeah, but it's one that he's in a weird way pushed into by this appearance of Elvis that comes into his life. So it's it's the subconscious side of himself that almost like wants to be this tough guy that he talks about when he's such a fan of the Sonny Chiba kung fu movies, the Street Fighter trilogy, right. And he's so into that world and just the comics and just all of that sort of stuff, where it's like he's in tune with with that violence. He's just never been a part of it. And you can see from it, I mean, he has a gun. It's not like he, hasn't kind of tapped into that side of himself, but it's clear he's never really gone there. And when he does go there and he kills Drexel, it is very, and takes a good beating himself. It's very much in a way where, like Elvis says, it's like the killing isn't that hard for him. It's sorry. Elvis says the killing is the hard part. It's the getting away with it that's easy. And but I did get a sense that the killing wasn't that hard for him. It's like he does it. I mean, yes, he has to. It's a bloody battle in the process of it, but psychologically, it's not that difficult for him. He does it. He deals with it. He moves on. And yes, he's pretty amped up when he gets back to the apartment, but it's not a psychological, place that he's getting tortured with. In fact, he goes through the rest of the film perfectly willing, seemingly, to kill anyone else he needs to, if it comes to that, in order to get what he needs to do, or like the money for all this cocaine, so that he and Alabama can go and have their happy life. So it's an interesting character, the way that he's written and the way he's played. He's innocent, but at the same time, that level is there.
Well, yeah, this is sort of where it takes on some, sort of noir themes, right? I mean, he ends up being, and he's already a con man, and he ends up becoming a killer, and yet because of this sort of fairy tale kind of romance that we're following here, he is the one that is just. Right, and he is the one that is, I think he goes back amped up to meet with Alabama again because he feels like it was a just killing. He did a really good deed in the very worst way. But he is still in the right, and he feels very strongly about that. But this really sets off the momentum for the rest of the film, and gives us the sense of pace that we're going to be seeing more of these kind of bursts of action and violence as he takes the wrong suitcase and ends up the whole sort of plot of the film centers around a mistaken snag of a suitcase, and he ends up getting a whole lot of cocaine instead of her clothes, because apparently they weigh the same.
They weigh the same, and they use the same suitcase.
Use the exact same suitcase.
Well,
which is okay. You totally buy that. That's totally okay.
Yeah, of course. I mean, he gives that girl the suitcase, go pack it up. And then he literally stands up to walk out of the room and grabs the suitcase. It's like, wow, she packed that suitcase so fast. Okay. So from there, we end up with these scenes, and it's you should go see the movie. The things that stand out for me, these performances from we end up meeting Christopher Walken and Dennis Hopper. Dennis Hopper plays Clarence's dad. Christopher Walken plays the Sicilian thug. Yeah, it's a notorious scene that's now just called the Sicilian scene. It really is great writing, and although I do remember I showed it to a girlfriend of mine at the time who was of Italian descent, and she wasn't very into the idea of it. She just wasn't very excited about that conversation. But I think it's very well written. I think it's smart. The way that Dennis Hopper's character goes about putting the situation in his favor. He knows where this whole thing is ending, and he changes it up by basically putting everything in his favor. So he basically skips all the beatings, skips having to give any information about his son, and just goes right to the end where he gets killed.
Right.
Brilliant.
It is brilliant. It is that it's a fantastic volley between these two guys, and watching, it's that feeling that you should have gotten the first time Michael Caine and what's his name were on screen together.
Morgan Freeman.
Morgan Freeman.
That's right.
But in this case, it's just fantastic because the way this whole sequence is architected, these two guys sitting in chairs across from one another, these just powerhouses of crazy, and seeing who can out lob one another for this fantastic. As I understand it, this sequence is essentially a transcription of a conversation that Tarantino had overheard from had heard from a fellow he was living with. It was
a family friend when he was a kid, and this guy had told him this story basically, and it wasn't really quite like that. Tarantino, he came up with the actual script. He was just talking to a friend, and right. They ended up kind of going off on the whole thing. But yeah, it's
because he was sharing that story with someone else later and said, "Hey, that's great. I should put that somewhere."
Exactly.
And boy, this just ended up perfect. Another short sequence of Dennis Hopper. He ends up being offed in this sequence, and to Walken's fantastic. I haven't killed anybody since 1984. It's just terrific.
And this is it very much is a Tarantino script, but we haven't really talked about Tony Scott yet, the director, who we've talked about on the show a number of times in the past, and I find him to be a fascinating director. He has a lot of very interesting ways that he tells his stories, and I think this in many ways is kind of a perfect story for him to tell. It really fits kind of everything about all of the stuff that he puts into his films, and I think it works really well as a Tony Scott film in his body of work. But I think this scene also really speaks to Tony Scott and directing. I think he's very smart. He early on, I think it was when they were setting up, they were going to shoot Walken's shot first, and then they were going to spin around and shoot Dennis Hopper doing his side of the conversation. And Walken came up to Tony and said, "You know what? I'd really appreciate it if you could, flip things around and shoot Dennis first and then me." And Scott was like, "Yeah, I think we can do that." So they did that. He arranged the schedule, and he really paid attention to Christopher Walken to see what it was that he was doing and why he wanted it that way. And so they shot Dennis Hopper's side first and everything. And he was studying Walken, and he really saw him piecing his performance together, and he saw him finding the character and finding the rhythm and finding the beats. And as a director, and so when they did spin the camera around and shot it, he was spot on perfect. And Scott was smart enough to recognize that Walken needed that, and he was smart enough to pay attention to that, to see that he was doing that and know what he needed to bring out in the performance. So it does feel very Tarantino, the dialogue. You've got two amazing actors doing it, but you got to give amazing credit also to the director for knowing how to work all three of those other elements, Hopper, Tarantino, and Walken, so that when it all came together, it was perfect.
I agree with you on all points. I think I think this is a really solid Tony Scott directed film. It's one that I get I have trouble sort of, because I mean, you know me, I like happy endings. Right, I really do, and in that respect, True Romance is sort of the perfect film for me because it gives me someone to root for. It gives me, the right kind of gratuitous violence that my inner 12-year-old loves. It gives me the romance that my inner chick flick fan loves, and it gives me a happy ending where both the characters live. Our main characters, Clarence and Alabama, they're on a beach, and now they have a kid. Mm-hmm. As I understand it, and as I think predictably, that's not how Tarantino intended the film to go.
Right.
And both Clarence and Alabama in the original script ended up dead.
Well, actually, Clarence ends up dead.
Oh, but Alabama lives.
She ends up alone.
All right, so he doesn't wake up. He gets shot in the head and doesn't wake up.
Correct.
And the other piece of note in that sort of conversation is that the way I understand it was the script originally was written in more of a non-linear fashion, right? And so here we have Tony Scott coming and doing with the script, kind of he Tony Scotts it and makes it a great linear thriller with a nice happy ending. And I also really like Quentin Tarantino films. Mm-hmm. Right? So I'm torn. Did he do a disservice to what was otherwise could have been a great script as written? I am really torn at the end of this film. Insofar as I like the way it ends, it satisfies my inner child. I also wanted him to stay dead.
Well, here's the thing. For the way that the film was made, and like I said, it does have this fairy tale sort of quality. It makes sense that they both end up living at the end.
No, it does.
And so in the context of, and Tarantino is on record saying this. He's a huge fan of the film. He loves what Tony Scott did with it. He fought Tony Scott with the ending, and said, "No, you have to. I plead with you. You have to let Clarence die." And you can't succumb to the Hollywood pressures to just give it this, this happy ending that you don't need. And Tony said, "Look, there's no pressure on me at all. Nobody is forcing me to change the ending. But here's the thing. Over the course of the story, I have fallen in love with these two characters. I love who they are. I want them to live. It's as simple as that. I feel that they are such a wonderful pair that they need to be able to ride off into the sunset at the end." And Tarantino, he totally understood where Tony was coming from, and he said, "That makes perfect sense to me. I say go for it." And that's the end of the film as it is, and I think it works really well with this film. Now, this was Tarantino's very first script that he ever wrote. He tried, I think, for like 5 years to get this script made, and he couldn't. And couldn't get the funding. People thought the script was well written, but they also thought he was just like, who is this kid who's breaking all these rules? And he's not doing it right. Basically, is kind of what people thought.
Right.
So he went and he was getting frustrated, and he wrote Natural Born Killers. Same thing. He couldn't get anyone to do it, and then he was just frustrated to no end. He said, "I'm just going to write something that I can make that's cheap." He wrote Reservoir Dogs, and he, through a contact of his, ended up talking to Tony Scott, and he said, "Yeah, I've got this script, Reservoir Dogs." Tony read it, loved it. He said, "I want to make this script." He said, "Well, I'm hoping to make that myself, but I've got these other scripts." And so he gave him the other two, and Tony read both, and he's just like, "True Romance, this is the one I want to make." Now, I don't know when all the changes came in the script as far as the non-linear to linear, but other than that, Quentin basically says the script is wholly intact, other than the change to a linear style. And I don't know. I don't think I miss what Tarantino would have done with this film. I mean, he says all three of those films were written to be his first film. Reservoir Dogs is the one that ended up being his first film. And people have asked him, "Well, do you wish that you had saved True Romance to do yourself?" He's like, "No, you know what? By the time I was done with Reservoir Dogs, I was kind of done with that script. I wanted to move on to something else. It was written to be my first film, not my second film." And, he defines kind of these differences in his scripts. And so I don't know. I think that by the time he made the film, he wasn't in a place to make True Romance. And I don't know. I think everything fell the way it needed to. I love this movie for what it is. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
No, you nailed it. I agree. Like I said, I agree with you, and that's why I'm torn. Because who wants to disagree with Tarantino? But I still, and this is me kind of 20 years later, looking at the film and saying, gosh, now I wish it were nonlinear. And I'm very different moviegoer than I was then. Anyhow, so Strong, Tony Scott directed film. We like Tony Scott. We miss him greatly. After we move on from our Walken and Hopper tribute scene. We end up hooking up with Michael Rappaport. Can't believe he's in here. I don't think that guy ages.
And he looks like a little puppy. I mean, he looks so young.
He still looks young.
Yeah, he does. He's one of those people who just doesn't age.
Crazy. And he is living with Brad Pitt. Floyd plays an awesome stoner.
Which is interesting. Tarantino has said that character of Floyd is the one character in this script that he felt he didn't flesh out very well. He said that was, of all the characters, mostly just a sketch. And he said Brad Pitt brought so much to that character, Floyd, that it's next to the Sicilian scene. That is one of people's most favorite things in this film. He's so funny, and it's just every time he's on screen. I can't tell you how many times my wife and I end up saying to each other, "Don't condescend to me, man."
Just need to get some milk and some cleaning supplies. That's ours. Get some cleaning supplies. He is really great. It's totally memorable, and I had forgotten how memorable he was. How ironic is that?
Oh, he's great.
It's just fantastic, and so through this, this convoluted connection of actors, we end up meeting through Michael Rappaport. We end up meeting Bronson Pinchot's Elliot Blitzer, who is a connection to Saul Rubinek's Lee Donowitz, the big named producer. And they're going to exchange all these drugs. He's going to sell all these drugs to Lee, and then they're going to walk away and move to Cancun, Clarence in Alabama. So then this becomes the film about the drug exchange. So we have now the police who catch Bronson Pinchot in a fantastic traffic stop where he gets the drugs all over his face, and now he has to wear a wire in this drug bust. We have the mob who finds out from Floyd where Clarence and Alabama are going to be, and we have so the police, the mob, and Clarence and Alabama with the movie people. And so,
well, and let's not forget that the movie people have their own set of well-armed bodyguards.
They do, and we should talk about the thugs on all points. The thugs for the mob are also legendary. The great James Gandolfini and Jon Favreau. But Gandolfini's fight with Patricia Arquette is stirring.
It's horrifying. It's really violent.
yeah.
And James Gandolfini, I guess a lot of the actors in this film were very, very method. Patricia Arquette was like in character the whole time. James Gandolfini was so in character in this film that he wanted, when they were fighting, he actually wanted her to drive the corkscrew into his foot because he wanted to feel it for his motivation. And she refused smartly because that's like an idiot. I think one of the crew members actually took like a compass and stuck it in his foot, and that gave him this motivation. There was a lot of violence in this, just in the making of this film, because Patricia Arquette had a hard time sometimes finding the emotional levels she needed to go to, and she actually asked Tony Scott to slap her a few times. And he said his fist or his hand became known as the persuader. So when she was struggling getting to that emotional level, she'd ask Tony to bring out the persuader. Oh my God.
Wow.
I know. It takes it to another level.
What a great set.
I tell you.
Caring.
Lots of medical bills.
That sequence, they both of these characters take some knocks, and in the end, she ends up. Insofar as his performance was great and horrifying. I mean, he's horrifying when he's looking at her and saying, go ahead, take a shot because I like you. She's threatening him with a corkscrew just before she drives it into his foot. he's taking his shirt off and he's saying, "Go ahead, give me a shot," like baring his chest to her, and once she gets the upper hand, you end up seeing, I think, an even more horrifying side of her as she assassinates him, really brutally.
Animalistic.
Yeah, it really is, and I think the rage that she channeled, in that sequence was fantastic.
It's interesting. That sequence was one that the MPAA really had a struggle with when they were determining the rating for this film. And they wanted them to cut it back before they released it. And it wasn't so much the violence on Gandolfini's part as it was the animalistic craziness that Patricia Arquette goes into when she starts attacking him. They basically said, she turns into too much of an animal. We need you to cut some of that out. It's crazy. It's like she's the hero. She's defending herself. It's not him beating her. It's her defending herself.
Right.
Trying to survive that they were, offended with. It's strange.
Well, so that's Gandolfini's. That's Gandolfini's role here, and on the producer's side, we have some other thugs, but the only one that I know, and unfortunately that I know well, is Eric Allen Kramer. Do you know why I know Eric Allen Kramer?
I want to know why you know that.
Because I have children, and my children love Good Luck Charlie.
Oh.
And Eric Allen Kramer plays the dad on Good Luck Charlie, which is
funny.
Nothing like his thug character in this movie.
That is hilarious.
I need an ambulance. Somebody call me an ambulance. Fantastic. Just before he is shot by Chris Penn. Chris Penn and Tom Sizemore.
Very happy cops.
Very happy. They are really the giddiest cops I think I've ever seen.
They're so excited to make this
really
bus.
Excited about this bus.
Like they've never made a bus before.
Tom Sizemore is vastly better in this film than he was in Strange Days.
Well, this film is vastly better than Strange Days, so I don't know if that's a fair.
Well, I just want to keep the marker out there. I just want to know that the marker is there.
That's right.
The bar was set low, and he outperformed his other role there.
Yeah.
Okay, so then we have and this is the part where I get. Did you want to talk about any more thugs?
No, there's so many. I mean, you see Kevin Corrigan popping up as one of the
right.
mobsters. You see Michael Beach popping up as one of the cops. I mean, there's lots of great faces that you see all through there. It's great seeing all these people in this great Mexican standoff.
And we didn't talk about Samuel L. Jackson's very brief performance.
Yeah, very brief, but memorable performance.
Also memorable, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so then we have the great standoff at the end, and this is where I'm watching this with my wife, and we always, whenever we see a gun kind of in a movie, we go to the often misattributed line from Hitchcock. If you place a gun on the mantle, it better go in Act 1. It better go off in Act 3.
Right.
Well, so then we see the mob and the police and everybody prepping for this standoff with their 10,000 guns on a bed.
It's a lot of artillery.
There's a lot of guns. And they all go off. They all go off at once. And this was the only thing in this film, frankly, that felt the whole time I'm thinking this movie really stands the test of time. It's like not dated at all. It feels like this fairy tale really holds up. And then they get to this standoff at the end, and there's just that's the part that starts to reek a little bit of Beverly Hills Cop to me.
Well,
just the tone and the feel. It's just kind of plastic
But it's the
loud.
Standoff that feels Tarantino, though. It's these three groups of people all holding weapons, pointing at each other. It feels very Tarantino, which of course, he is pulling that whole Mexican standoff idea from so many other films that came before that he's such a fan of, because he is a cineast. He loves movies. He loves stealing from movies and making them his own. And
he very much loves this whole idea of creating the kerfuffle of Crossfire, and it's a legendary trope in action films, gunslinging films.
Quite a kerfuffle.
You can quote me on that. And in the process, we lose a lot of people.
Yeah. According to our favorite weapons site, the Internet Movie Firearms Database, there's at least 13 different models of weapons used in this film. Yeah, that's...
I'm glad to know that. Would you like to highlight any specific models, Andy?
Well, we've got the Ithaca 37 Stakeout. That's the one that Drexel uses to kill the drug dealers he stole from. Of course, Clarence, at the beginning of the film, to kill Drexel, uses his little Smith & Wesson Model 66. And, there's such a variety of guns all the way through. The Remington 870 sawed-off that James Gandolfini is carrying.
Sort of a celebrity weapon.
It is also all over the bed that all of the mobsters are packing.
Right.
More Smith & Wessons that they have. The Desert Eagle is one of them that one of the mobsters has. You've got, and then of course you've got some Heckler and Koch MP5K submachine gun during the final shootout. The Uzi, it's your buddy, your kid's favorite dad is brandishing his Uzi when he's mowing people down.
That really was a weapon of the 90s, wasn't it? The Uzi.
Yeah, it was. It's good stuff. So it's we'll post this on our
we got to post the link.
Our show notes so you can all look at all these wonderful weapons used in the film.
And then we get Clarence gets shot in the eye.
Yeah,
really, sort of shot like kind of above the eye, right? That's the hole in his head. There was a bullet in there, right?
Yeah, above the eye, enough to make him blind, I guess, in one eye. I guess that's what happened.
That's kind of my sense of it. It feels like a pretty big hole.
Yeah,
when you're looking at it,
it looks like at least there's something there. Yeah,
it's a hole that looks like it's a hole that could kill a guy.
Yeah, and
maybe I would be less, this is an interesting perspective that I had, and this is pretty dark. So I'm gonna go a little bit dark. I would have a different sense of the believability of this film, and maybe I did have a different sense of the believability of his reawakening before Gabby Giffords.
Mm.
Right?
Oh, yeah, that is kind of a gloomy dose of reality brought into this film.
And I can't help not thinking about that. Talk about cinema perspective.
Yeah.
Two miraculous recoveries there.
Yeah.
So I like I was saying, I only don't like it, not because it's not believable, but anymore at least, but certainly because I just wanted that Tarantino twist.
Right.
So he lives and they go off and they do their thing in Cancun on the beach.
With the little baby Elvis.
Everybody's happy.
Yeah. It was a true romance after all.
It turns out it was. Who else do we need to be attributing this film? We talked about Hans Zimmer.
His stolen music is great in this film, but it's a wonderful, wonderful tune for it. I think the cinematography, Jeffrey L. Kimball does a great job with it. He's kind of done a number of films with Tony Scott. Top Gun, Beverly Hills Cop 2, Revenge, True Romance. I think that was all he did with him. So, a good run with him for a little while. And he's just, he has a good vibe, and he's been going all the way up to The Expendables and currently working on Big Thunder, TV movie, and A Doll's House. So, he's a DP who has a flashy eye, and I think for Tony Scott's needs of having lots of bright colors, moving camera, very alive sort of storytelling, I think that Kimball really, I think he did a very effective job for him.
Well, I think he did. He did some interesting. He does some really interesting things with palettes. He did.
Yeah.
This was he did a bunch of stuff with John Woo. Maybe not a bunch of stuff. I know he did Mission Impossible 2.
Right.
And Wind Talkers, was that the other one?
Yes.
But he also ended up doing, like, you look at the collection of films that he has done. Yeah, here they are. Okay, so you look at the collection of films that he's done sort of in the early 2000s, and you have these really interesting palettes from, like, Star Trek Nemesis. They went with this, like, green everywhere, and apart from the green blood of the Vulcan, it wasn't really ever a major sort of hue for the series, and it ends up making kind of a really interesting choice for that film. Stigmata, another Patricia Arquette, which I was a big fan of that film. I wonder if I would still like that. It was just a really interesting sort of vision of kind of hell. But I just really like the stuff that he's done generally, and ironic that I would lampoon this movie with a Beverly Hills Cop reference when in fact he was a DP for Beverly Hills Cop 2.
There you go. Yeah. It was directed by Tony Scott.
Right.
So there you go.
Everyone. Welcome to Good Money.
Oh my goodness.
What did you do there?
I don't know.
We're talking good money. Make that stop.
I don't know what that is. Something opened on my computer. I love it when that happens.
I would also like to add that you're doing it again.
Oh, yeah. I can't find it.
Yeah, I forgot what I was going to say. All right. It was something about Bronson Pinchot and Jürgen Prochnow.
Jürgen Prochnow?
Yeah.
He's not in this.
No, he's not. But you don't want to confuse the two.
Have you ever confused
Or he'll give you Das Boot.
Oh, my God.
What?
Oh.
Right?
Wow. That's possibly one of the worst jokes I've ever heard.
No, it's not. You've totally heard worse jokes.
I probably have.
All right.
Probably have, yeah.
What else do we need to talk about this movie?
This movie, along with a couple others that came out around the time, spurred quite a vitriolic attack by Senator Bob Dole, attacking Hollywood's values and their products when he was campaigning for president. It was, he really dug into the industry, in particular singling out Natural Born Killers and True Romance. Oddly enough, both films written by Quentin Tarantino. And he had a serious problem with how this industry was, creating this violent world that, we were essentially, according to him, we were all becoming, and we were turning into, violent people because of it. It really, his comments really created a backlash in Hollywood against him. And, I don't know how much it hurt he obviously didn't become president, but I can't remember at the time how much it actually hurt him, as far as when all of the people in Hollywood, the producers and actors and everyone came out kind of saying, yeah, when times are tough and when there's a lot of violence in society, you blame the playwrights, you blame the people who are, capturing the essence of what's going on and translating it into an art that everybody is watching. And I don't know. I am curious if it seems like we have gone down a road, then Bob Dole was right, or if it really is something where, he's just, this age-old question is cinema and art really just a reflection of the times, or is it also leading to and kind of desensitizing us from the times and kind of perpetuating it? And in a way, I think it goes almost hand in hand with that whole philosophy of Tarantino and this world of Tarantino that he has created with all these parallel realities and all this sort of stuff. This is his, according to whoever it was that we talked about before. I believe it's Cracked.com that had that story, or somebody had a story about how Tarantino, all of his films tie together, and in Inglourious Bastards, because these people kill Adolf Hitler in this violent bloodbath and burn the theater down, basically. In a movie theater, it basically everybody in that world, now this parallel reality, grows up very attached to just pop fiction or pop culture, and very desensitized to violence. And it's interesting looking at Tarantino's work, and it's interesting that Bob Dole singled those two out, how violent they are and how violent, really violence does go through all of his scripts in a very strong way. I don't know. I just find it very interesting that that's part of this, this whole parallel reality theory about Tarantino and his work.
There is a. Did you see the Maxim article on the 15-year anniversary
No,
panel?
I didn't.
There is a wonderful piece that I will post in the show notes. True Romance 15 years later, where they get all the actors together and Tarantino, and they sit down and talk about kind of the impact the film has had. It's a great long conversation, and they do mention Bob Dole saying that the film was disgusting. Arquette says senators talked about True Romance because they were advocating more censorship. Bob Dole said our movie was disgusting, or maybe he said that I was disgusting. And Tarantino says, I knew that Dole had not seen True Romance or Natural Born Killers. I just couldn't believe a guy running for president of the United States, land of the free and home of the brave, was condemning art he hadn't seen. You effing a-hole. You'd say anything to get elected. So I think they're buds.
I think so. They play poker. He was probably bitter about losing a poker.
Yeah, losing a poker game. It's a fascinating statement, but I think the end of this interview actually has an interesting line from Tarantino that I think is important to your point and to the role that this film has in the development of his catalog. Mm-hmm. People have told me they put the "You're So Cool" line in their wedding vows. I even met a couple with matching "You're So Cool" tattoos. True Romance and Reservoir Dogs were the growing pains for Pulp Fiction's success. Audiences were seeing something they hadn't seen before, comedy and violence switching on a dime. They'd be horrified one second and laughing the next. And I hadn't really thought about it in that context, that that in many respects these movies were teaching us how to whether it's teaching us sort of how to approach violence in a new way, a new, maybe more accessible way, or desensitizing us. I mean, frankly, there's some of that, but either way, we were learning something in the 90s with these movies that clearly hasn't abated.
Yeah,
I think this movie plays a pretty clear role.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a very interesting step in our culture and in filmmaking, and looking at it now. And I don't know what version you have and what you watched, but I watched the unrated director's cut.
Yep.
In today's society, by today's standards, it doesn't seem that outlandish to watch this film. It's a little surprising that stuff was cut. Maybe that was just something back in 20 years ago when the film came out, that it was just a little different times, and maybe we have desensitized a little bit to it now. So then when you watch this, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, it's nothing new. Mm-hmm. But I don't feel like I myself have grown more violent or horrified by real violence because I've watched this movie.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah. So
Good
take
film.
that, Bob Dole.
It did ringtone. It did not do well.
This film did not do well. Did not at all. It has since grown and become quite popular in that kind of cult status where virtually everybody probably has seen it now. But boy, at the time, I mean, Tony Scott said that he had a budget of $13.5 million to make the film. I haven't seen anything about prints and advertising. I don't know how much more went into it, but $13.5 was the budget. Domestically, it only made about $12.3 million. So this film lost money. This was one of our losers on our list. Like I said, it's grown in cult status. It's been re-released in theaters around the world time and time again. It's done very well on DVD, Blu-ray, and it's probably by now made a lot of money. But in its initial theatrical run, it is a loser.
That's too bad.
Yeah.
I want to just give a quick shout out back to Lee Donowitz. Saul Rubinek, who is one of the most interesting actors I think I can think of to watch. Like, he's just got a really interesting face.
Yeah.
Are you a Warehouse 13 fan?
I'm not a Warehouse 13 fan.
So
I don't know what that is.
What? Well, they're just Warehouse 13 is another fantastic guilty pleasure sci-fi show.
Gotcha.
And it's been on it just wrapped its 4th season, and he's a principal character in this series. And they just, at least following Twitter, they're just wrapping a shooting for an abbreviated season 5 as the show has been canceled, and so it's very, very sad to see this show go. It's one of those shows that you just kind of you become friends with the people in this show, and Saul Rubinek is, he's my bud. He's Artie.
There you go.
So,
and another little interesting tidbit. Speaking of the Tarantino universe, his character is the son of Donnie the Bear Jew Donowitz in Inglourious Bastards.
Yes.
Yeah. So
I like these universe mashups. Yeah, I really like this theory. I mean, it really.
It's interesting that this man who creates these, this big Hollywood producer creates these Vietnam films. His father was one of the people who killed Hitler.
Right?
And Alabama apparently had been a former partner of Mr. White, Harvey Keitel's character in Reservoir Dogs.
I need to go pull out Reservoir Dogs again. I feel like that's a linchpin.
It is. It is.
So what a great film. Let's rank it.
Let's do it. And where can they find us?
Oh, well, if you head to Flickchart, prompt. If you head to flickchart.com/thenextreel, you will find our top films. And, you don't even have to remember that. Just go to thenextreel.com, click on the big button right in the sidebar there. It says, hey, go check out the golden list. And you'll head straight to our user account.
All right, you ready? Here we go. True Romance or Moon?
Oh, wow. Well, those are not similar.
Not at all. And kind of hard to compare.
I know. I'm going to go True Romance.
I am too. The characters in True Romance. There's so many characters.
There's so many characters. They only win on volume.
That's right. Wow, this is a tough one for me. True Romance or The Social Network? I'm going to have to go Social Network on this one.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. True Romance or The Town?
True Romance.
Man, I'm really torn on that one. The Town is such a great heist film. I'll say True Romance because of the characters, but I think I like The Town better. True Romance or The Natural? I'm going to do True Romance.
Yeah, but man tears, Andy.
I know. Think of all those characters.
All right, True Romance.
All right.
Crazy.
I know. True Romance or Marathon Man?
True Romance.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I am surprised that Marathon Man is higher than The Natural, though. True Romance or Zero Dark 30? Oof. I'm going to have to go Zero Dark 30.
Why? The characters, Andy. The characters.
Oh, man. Zero Dark 30 is just cinematic brilliance.
If you say it's because it's so Zero Dark 30-ish, I'm going to call you on that one. Because it's Zero Dark Brilliant.
Oh, that's right. All right. I'll do True Romance.
All right. That's better.
And There you have it. 26.
26
out of 98.
Oh, 98. We're so close.
I know. We're getting there.
All right. Hey, nice one. Where do we go from here? What are we doing next week? We don't even know what we're doing next week.
That's right. We're
kind of a toss-up.
We're so still getting back into the flow of things that we're not sure.
Right.
But
so
it's going to be a great one.
It is going to be a great one because all of our options are great. Couples on the Run continues next week.
Absolutely.
All right. I'm done with you. This has been way too long. This has been a crazy long show.
We should, as a couple, we should go on the run.
You just took it to the awkward place. We were doing fine.
No, like a midnight run sort of run. Not a true romance sort of run.
Nope. It was
it too late?
No, it was fine. And then you just
I did that, didn't I?
Now there's explaining. Now there's going to be explaining to do.
Leave it to me. Leave it to me to ruin the ending.
It is hard to believe that we have been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
So many great conversations over the years about so many great movies.
And some stinkers.
Well, true. But producing this show week after week requires a ton of work behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our Originals page when shopping for books and movies that we've covered.
Just visit thenextreel.com/originals. Your purchases made through our links give us a small commission at no extra cost to you and allow us to keep having these great discussions.
In Season 3, we covered even more great adaptations like The Night of the Hunter and It Happened One Night, both part of our Couples on the Run series.
We talked about No Country for Old Men. The Coen brothers so rarely adapt someone else's work.
We had some fun rom-com adaptations like About a Boy, based on the Nick Hornby novel, and Nick and Nora's Infinite Playlist, adapted from Rachel Cohn and David Levithan's book.
In our terribly and naively named foreign language series, we discussed The Brilliant City of God and The Diving Bell and the Butterfly, which I won't ever be able to watch again, ever.
But could you read the original memoir?
I don't know, maybe?
We had our Richard Dysart series with adaptations like The Day of the Locust and Being There.
Plus, we had that fantastic interview with the man himself.
The one where we had him sit on the floor?
Because this chair was so squeaky. Good times.
We did our first Tom Hanks series with Forrest Gump, adapted from Winston Groom's novel, plus Apollo 13, based on Lost Moon by Jim Lovell.
And we did another year series looking at films from 1981, including Das Boot, Gallipoli, and Thief, all based on books.
Listeners can dive deeper into all of these original stories and more at thenextreel.com/originals. Every book, play,
movie,
video game. You bet. We have talked about some video game adaptations as well. It doesn't matter the source, just follow the link. Every purchase supports the podcast.
Check out the full list at thenextreel.com/originals and get reading, watching, performing, or playing today.